Hello, everyone. And before we actually start this game analysis, I would like to tell you that I finally became a candidate master FIDE by reaching the third place at the European Chess Championship on the 2300. So thank you. I know that many of you knew exactly that I was playing the tournament. I would like to thank you, everyone that supported me by buying my books, by making some donations on PayPal, etc., etc. Even even the people that just took a lesson to me just to help me get the money to play this championship. I would like to thank you very much. I will make a special live stream, and for those of you who really wants that, I will be uploading a special video series, with all my games and all the analyses, and also some very cool opening novelties. So thank you again, and now let's just jump in. So this is a very cool game played by Magnus Carlsen, and Magnus Carlsen decided to just destroy Fabiano Caruana with the London system. What happened now is the following. So we play basically a classical London system, and white played with e3. So logical, we bring the pieces out. c5, striking in the center, and usually we'd say to play c3. But now Magnus played the move knight f3. The idea is that if you take, I will just take back with the e-pawn, and I don't care, I will play c4 and not c3. That is the whole point. So knight c6, putting pressure. Knight bd2. This is like more modern way to play because we really want to play c4 in one move. Yeah, knight h5 was played, but queen b6 is the most played move. We really try to not let white the time to play the move c4 because now it will be hanging. And the theory goes d takes c5, queen b2, knight b3, and for example, queen c3 check, queen d2, queen d2. Okay, knight takes or king takes. But basically, this is a very solid position, and yeah, this is playable. And I see that a friend of mine named Fabian Frey, 2023, played this game against Noah Fecker. So I suppose it's a game played in Switzerland. But okay, a friend of mine, an enemy of mine, I won against him at the Grenke Open. Basically, knight h5. And and Magnus Carlsen played the move d takes e5, which is just winning a pawn. And the idea is that, okay, I took a pawn, you destroy my pawn structure, but I will play knight b3 and hold to this pawn. And this is really the whole idea of playing knight bd2. Knight h5, d takes e5, and now knight f4, d takes, and queen a5, trying to not let the knight jump to b3. So Fabiano Caruana is playing it extremely well, and I see that you see that the engine wants Magnus to play the move c4, but he started with bishop d3, which is an inaccuracy. And the whole point is that once you take this pawn, Magnus wants to castle and say, okay, I'm not up a pawn anymore, my pawn structure is slightly worse, but I don't care because you cannot play e5, and anytime you play e6, I will play f5. So Caruana says, okay, I won't play e6, I will play g6, preparing to play bishop g7. Now f5, I just take it, and my king isn't on an open e-file. Knight b3 was played, queen d6, and now the pawn is getting attacked, queen d2, bishop g7, and c3. This is a logical move. We are closing this diagonal. Okay, castles. Now I see that the engine wants Magnus to play knight bd4, but Magnus decided to play rook fe1, which is a very good and pretty sensitive move. The problem of that move is that it's basically allowing black to go for bishop g4 to then take and then play e5. I'm just asking myself a question. Can't we just play e5 now? I think it's completely playable. And now, okay, we have an isolated pawn on d5, but it cannot be attacked. And I think that the bishop pair is a lot more important in this position than a small weakness that cannot be attacked. I think that's what the engine recommends. But okay, bishop g4, queen e3, and bishop takes f3, takes, and e6. And black is probably slightly better, but it's very difficult, really to say how to proceed with the white pieces. So even though it's slightly better for black, I wouldn't be surprised if white just lost, a little bit the initiative. Here, the best way to play was actually played by Magnus. It's actually to play h4, but there is another plan which requires you to play queen e3. You play something, and then knight c5. And I'm just starting to cause some practical problems. If you go b6, especially I can just go back to b3, and now I just weakened your light squares a little bit. So this is like another way to play, but white's position is still fine. We can still play with g4 and f5. In the game, he played the move h4, h5. We cannot play h5 anymore, so just g3, and there is no more problems. The position is pretty solid. Now black really wants to play e5 to cause some practical problems. Rook e8, rook a d1, and a6. Because if you play e5 right now, there might be some problems on this pawn, and and it happens that sometimes you just lose your pawn on d5 like this for absolutely no reason. So he decided to play a6 and wait a move just to see what could eventually happen later on. And also it's preventing the bishop to jumping from b5, because once the bishop is there, it might actually take this knight, because this knight would actually help in the pawn push. So it makes sense. 92. So Magnus tries to, reorientate the knight on e3, or even on g2, sacrifice the pawn and put it on f4. It's like typical Magnus Carlsen idea. He will do something in 25 moves. b5, which is inaccurate. The engine says queen 7, but okay, it's not really relevant. And 94, playing on the pin. This is relevant. If you take, bishop takes, and I'm attacking both the knight and the queen, so you have to move the queen, but then I take the knight on c6, it's a fork, and it's just winning. So that is why queen d7 was played. Knight g5. Now we are trying to strike a little bit on the king side and eventually play f5 or g4, really trying to move these pawns away. Let's just imagine that you manage to play g4 and then you take. The pawn cannot take back, because after queen takes, black's position is already hopeless. Some checkmate threats might actually appear at some point. So that is why black has to be pretty, energetic. Rook a d8, it's not very energetic, and now bishop c2, which is slightly wrong. Probably the best move was now a4, because in this position, if you played a4 takes, the bishop couldn't take the pawn on a6. But now that the rook is on d8, if you play a4 takes, now the pawn on a6 can be taken, and this is a weak a5 pawn. I'm sorry, a4 pawn. So that is why bishop c2 was played, but bishop c2 doesn't make any more sense. I think that, again, it's time to be energetic. And okay, bishop c2, b4. Now you see that it's a mistake. And why is it a mistake? Because it's very slow. And also it's opening up this long diagonal. And of course, Magnus Carlsen will use it. B takes c3, b takes c3. We don't want to lose a pawn. And now the final blunder, bishop c8. And the reason why, I'm sorry, bishop c8, queen c8. And the reason why it's a blunder is because of the brutal finish of Magnus Carlsen. f5. And if you remember it correctly, I told you that if there is no more g-pawn, queen takes h5 or queen h5 is deadly. Just checkmate is coming. And if you take with the e-pawn, now I can actually take. And if you take back with the rook, I have queen takes d5, which is both attacking the knight and the pawn on f7. And if you move the knight defending it, I grab your rook on e8. So this is already hopeless. So he took with the g-pawn, and now Magnus could have taken on h5, but he started with c4. And the point of c4 is that you cannot take the pawn, I take your knight. So simple tactics. 94, but 95 was the best. Doesn't matter, the rook sacrifices the answer, because after you take back, I have queen h5. If he had sacrificed, for example, the rook on e5, it would be exactly the same. Now I'm threatening checkmate or checkmate, because in this position, when I play queen h5, I can be threatening check, but once the king goes away, let's say we play it actually, check this, I cannot go queen h8 because the queen is hanging. Sure, the rook is hanging, but it's just to show you that this is still a great defender. So 94. And also it's relying on this small tactic that then the rook is hanging, but it doesn't really matter right now since black's position is completely hopeless. Queen c7 trying to defend, but c takes d5, there is a pin, we cannot take the pawn back, otherwise it's losing the rook. So rook e7, and now we take on e6, because now there is a huge weakness on e6. If this, we can even grab the pawn. So f6 was played, but now queen g6 check, king f8. If rook g7, this is just checkmate, and king f8. Now I cannot go knight h7 yet because rook takes, and I'll be losing the knight. But I can play the move knight f3, and the whole point is that I want to take there, and if you move the bishop that way, I can take the pawn, and this is just simply winning. So bishop c3 was played, and now rook c1. He really wants to take this pawn, or sometimes you just sacrifice there. Even just putting pressure, this position is already winning. Magnus is up 2 pawns. He can still go for a checkmate attack whenever he wants to, so he decided not to do it. Rook takes e6, and now knight d4, playing on the pin. If you take the knight, I take the queen, and after rook b6, queen h6 check. Knight f5 was also winning, but queen h6, the whole point is that if you go queen g7, I can take the queen and take there. So king g8 was played in order not to lose the piece there, and now queen e3, playing again on some tactics. So the knight is pinned, and if you take there, what's funny is I can go queen e8 check in between move. You move the king, and then I grab the queen, because if I had taken there on d4, the queen would have taken my rook on c1, which is of course not good. And the game ended here. There is no way to defend the bishop, and you basically see how Magnus Carlsen wins again very easily in the London system. So to really keep it simple, the London system is great if you don't know how to proceed, because your position is so solid that you can still do whatever you want. It's extremely flexible. So again, I think you already know that, but I have a book about the London system and the London system theory. All the links are, of course, in the description. If you have any more questions, just let me know in the comment section. I'll be more than happy to answer you. Hopefully see you in the future. Take care.